Hey everyone, Mr. VB here. So now that Halloween 2018 is finally out and I've seen the movie twice, I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts and ranking on the Halloween series. Now before I get into this list, I want to quickly mention that I'm not going to be including the Rob Zombie remakes because I have never watched them. I think Rob Zombie is a terrible director. I don't like any of the movies that he's made. They're filled with terrible, atrocious, sometimes disgusting dialogue that kind of bothers me, and I just don't really feel like watching those Halloween remakes. I've seen plenty of clips though, and I've watched lots of reviews, so I know what to expect from those movies, and I know that they would definitely be near the bottom of this list. With that being said, let's jump onto this ranking at number 9, where we have Halloween Resurrection. So Halloween Resurrection was released in 2002 and was directed by Rick Rosenthal, who directed Halloween 2 from 1981, which baffles me because Halloween 2 is actually a good sequel. This movie is atrocious. This is honestly one of the worst horror films I've ever watched. It completely destroys and retcons the ending of H20, which ended on a great note. Michael was finally dead. Laurie faced her fears and killed him, and that was an amazing ending, and this film just destroys that, and the way they retcon it is so stupid. Apparently, that was a paramedic that Michael had strangled and left him voiceless, so Laurie mistaken him for Michael and then killed him. And it's just stupid. So then Laurie spends, the last few years of her life in a psycho ward until Michael comes there and kills her like 15 minutes into the movie. It feels so disrespectful to the character, and I'm so glad we have the new film that just completely destroys this movie because honestly, I don't think that's a fitting ending for the character whatsoever. It honestly really pisses me off. The rest of this movie isn't good either, though. You think maybe, the first 15 minutes are bad because it's like, killing off Laurie, but the rest is still crap. You have this webcam show where basically people go to the Myers house and stay there for a night and try not to get scared or anything from all these jump scares and props they have set up. But of course, Michael returns home because he has no family members left, which isn't true because he literally has a nephew that was introduced in H20. Laurie had a son in that movie, and they're just completely avoiding that character in this movie, which angers me. I think this movie would have actually been way better if Michael was going after Laurie's son, because that's a character we know and kind of care for, so it wouldn't feel like as bad as just killing off this great character and then having all these stupid, uninteresting characters for the rest of the movie, like Busta Rhymes, who karate chops and fights Michael, and spits out terrible dialogue. This movie is just really bad, and it basically killed the Halloween franchise until it was remade by, Rob Zombie, and then that killed the Halloween franchise one more time. On to number 8, we have Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. So, Revenge of Michael Myers is not as bad as Resurrection, but it is actually more disappointing, because Resurrection was just a film that did not need to be made. Halloween 5 came right after Halloween 4, which I actually really like, and this movie this is when things started to get really crappy. First of all, Jamie, who is a great character in Halloween 4 and had a great twist at the end, is not good in this movie. She can't speak, they wreck on the idea where she killed her mom at the end. It turns out that she was actually being mind controlled by Michael. So they just said all these things. That being said, I still think her performance is good in this movie. I just don't like that she can't speak for the majority of it. Rachel, who is her foster sister, which was a great character in the last movie because their relationship was fantastic, is killed off 20 minutes in. Again, another mistake. Why killing off a great character 20 minutes in? She's replaced with her friend Tina, who is not that enjoyable at all. She's really annoying, actually, and her friends in this movie are some of the worst characters in this entire franchise. One of her friends dresses up as Michael Myers and scares police officers. I honestly think this movie would have been like 10 times better if the police officers had shot him and mistaken him for Michael and he dies. That would have been hilarious. These characters, by the way, are horrible. The police officers, whenever they come on screen, there's this stupid music that plays that sounds like there are some kind of clown sounds. It's really bad. The only redeeming value of this movie, I would say, is Jamie, despite the fact that I don't think it's a good idea to not have her talk. I still think the performance was fantastic by Danielle Harris. She is still to this date one of the best child actors in my opinion. And Donald Pleasance, of course. He is the best part of these sequels. His performance is absolutely fantastic. I love how he gets more mad over the course of these movies, really wanting to stop the evil that is Michael Myers. I honestly believe there's only like one good scene in this movie, and that's where Jamie is in the Myers house, which, by the way, the Myers house in this movie looks nothing like the Myers house. It is like the Myers mansion in this film. It's way bigger than it was in the previous films, and it looks nowhere near similar. That being said, there is one scene where she is in this like clothing shoot and Michael's trying to stab at her. It's actually pretty suspenseful and creepy, and then you find out that the actress was actually in danger because they were really stabbing at her, and then you kind of question that scene. Yeah, this movie just is really bad. It feels like it was direct-to-DVD. It does not feel like a Hollywood movie whatsoever. Halloween 4 kind of had that direct-to-DVD feel, but it was still a good movie, whereas this is just a complete pile of crap. On to number 7, we have Halloween 3, The Season of the Witch. So Season of the Witch is the most controversial Halloween film of all time. It is hated by a lot of fans for not having Michael Myers in it, but it's also liked by a lot because in its own merits, they think it's a really good movie. Me, personally, I don't really agree with either sides. I don't think not having Michael in a Halloween film is bad because they had to do something different. They couldn't always just recycle the same stuff. Clearly, fans didn't like that, though. And for me, personally, I just don't think this is a particularly good movie in its own merits. I think this film is really slow. I've seen this film twice. I just rewatched it about a month ago, and yeah, I really didn't care for it. I thought that this film is really boring and slow, and, you know, that's definitely a huge issue. I just don't think it's very interesting. Also, it kind of has a lack of a antagonist. There is the toy creator, the Irish toy maker, who owns the company Silver Shamrock, and the whole plot to this movie is that they're going to basically make these Halloween masks and sell them all over the US, so all the kids will get them, and they'll wear these masks on Halloween, and then they'd be watching their television and they'd all die because these masks are cursed with pieces from Stonehenge. It's a pretty weird and wacky plot, but I like it. It's pretty dark, it's pretty creepy and eerie, but when you really think about it, there were 60 million kids under the age of 18 in the US in the 1980s, and we expect them to actually make 60 million masks. That seems pretty stupid in my opinion. I don't think any company makes that much masks. Yeah, not a very good plot when you really think about it, but I still think it's a good idea overall. And like I said, you just don't have a real antagonist in this movie. It seems kind of boring because they're in this ghost town, and the one thing this movie does get right is the tone. The tone of this film is very mysterious and eerie, so I like that about it. But when these characters are there, there's no real threat. I mean, there are the robots going around and stuff, but it just doesn't have this feeling of like, oh, there's this killer going after them. The same kind of suspense and thrill that you feel when you watch the Michael Myers movies. So that's really my big issue with Halloween 3 Season of the Witch. Of course, it ends on a super dark note where the television ends up playing one of the ads, so I think all of the kids on the Pacific side of the states die. So the west side of the states dies. Yeah, pretty dark ending. On to number 6, we have Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. So this is actually the lowest rated Halloween movie on Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic, and I'm kind of surprised by that. I don't think this movie is that bad. I actually think this is kind of average. I don't hate this as much as a lot of people do. A lot of people think this is a terrible movie, and for me, it's kind of right in the middle, maybe even a little bit above that, maybe like a 6 out of 10. I don't think this is a great film, though. This film has a lot of issues. There is a producer's cut that I've not seen yet, so I can't really say, my thoughts on that, although I have heard it's much better. Yeah, the film it does have a lot of flaws. So the plot to this movie is really trying to give Michael Myers a backstory. They're trying to develop him more because really, at this point, all we know is that he likes to kill his family and that he's a psychopath. We don't know his motives, though, like why he's doing it. And it turns out there's this cult known as the Thorn Cult, where basically they choose a kid every, I don't know how many years or whatever, and they're basically forced to kill a family member, or kill all their family members in order to keep the spirit or whatever going on or something like that. It's a pretty out there idea, and well, it doesn't work 100%. I do kind of like it. I think it's kind of an interesting concept. Obviously, we didn't need it though, and it doesn't work very, very well in the long run, but I think it was kind of interesting for this movie. The problem with this film though is just it's kind of the same thing we've already seen before. I don't think this movie really did much new besides, introducing that stuff from Michael Myers, and the backstory that they did add was pretty messy. There's some problems with it and that kind of stuff. Jamie's back, but she's being played by a different actress because they didn't want to give Danielle Harris that much money for this movie, so that's why she didn't do it, which right there is just kind of stupid because when they do kill off Jamie in this movie, I don't really care too much because it just doesn't seem like it's the same character. I know in the producer's cut, Jamie does live though, so there's kind of two different versions. It doesn't really matter though because they never go back to this whole Jamie trilogy ever again. Yeah, so Paul Rudd's in this movie playing Tommy Doyle, one of the kids that Laurie was babysitting in the original, and he's kind of weird in this movie. I'm not a huge fan of him in this film. He's very weird and awkward ever since what happened, which is understandable. I just think he comes across as really weird. The best part of this movie, once again, is Donald Pleasance, though. Donald Pleasance is great in this film. This is actually his last theatrical performance because he passed away either during or after filming, which sucks. It's really sad, but he is great in this film. He's great in all of the sequels. In this film, though, you can just tell by his voice, like, he's really old at this point. If he was still alive, I think he would be, like, 101 now, or he'd be 99 or something like that. So, yeah, he passed away, you know, during filming or whatever, and I think he's definitely the best part of this movie. Michael's mask is actually pretty good in this movie. He looks way better than he did in the last two movies, and, yeah, overall, I think this is a decent film. I also like Kara Strode. She's a pretty good character, and some of the kills in this movie are pretty inventive. Alright, on to number 5, we have Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. So now we're getting into the good category. I really like Halloween 4. I would actually go as far as saying it's great. I know that's not the, you know, opinion that the vast majority of people have, but I really like Halloween 4. I think it's a really solid sequel. It does kind of have a direct-to-DVD feel from it. 4 and 5 really have that feeling to me. But that being said, I still really enjoyed this movie. I think this was definitely a back-to-basics style Halloween, where we have Michael, you know, just going around killing random people, going after Jamie, who is his niece, because Laurie has a son in this film, or a daughter, sorry, but she's dead. Laurie is actually not in this. Apparently she died in a car crash, which is something I'm not a huge fan of, but whatever. So yeah, Jamie is a character in this movie, and I think Danielle Harris is fantastic. She is definitely the best part, well, one of the best parts of this movie. I still think Donald Pleasance is great, but she is fantastic in this movie. She's one of the best child actresses I've ever seen. Whenever she's crying, it seems so believable. She's just really, really good at acting. Her older sister Rachel is also a really nice character, because whereas other characters in these kind of movies, when the characters are going through something really bad, they're like, you know, oh, I'm just gonna go see my boyfriend or whatever, but Rachel actually cares for Jamie, so that's something that I really liked. The relationship was great, making it even more annoying when, you know, she dies in the next movie so early on. So yeah, I really like the characters in this movie. I think the characters in this are actually really, really good. The main three, especially. Michael in this movie, his mask is not that good. It looks pretty plain, but when I watch the movie, it doesn't bother me as much as it used to. I don't know, I just like this movie all a lot. I think it's a pretty average, basic Halloween film, and just because of that, I mean, I just think it works really, really well. So yeah, there you go. I really, really like Halloween 4. On to number 4, we have Halloween H20, 20 years later. So H20 was released in 1998, 20 years ago, which is pretty crazy because, you know, it was supposed to be like 20 years later. And this movie is a pretty good sequel, although I do think it is definitely aged, and it does have some problems looking back on it. The biggest one is that this movie came out right after Scream, so it was kind of trying to be aware of all these kind of, you know, cliches in horror movies, and that's something that just did not work in a Halloween movie. It felt kind of weird seeing that. Also, I think this film is far too short. It's actually shorter than the original. It's only an hour and 20 minutes if you take away credits, which is really, really short. Michael doesn't even really show up until like 40 minutes in when you actually see him for the first time. That's pretty far into the movie. And yeah, I just don't think Michael's that good in this movie. He has probably about like 5 minutes of screen time or less. Well, not, maybe a little bit more than 5 minutes, but he's barely in it. And when he is in it, he's okay. I don't know. I don't like his mask that much in this movie, although I love the final showdown with Laurie and Michael. I think that's great. I love the way that she's just using all these things to attack Michael, you know, whether it's like knives or anything. And of course, she kills Michael in the end by chopping off his head with an axe. What a great ending. You know, they finally killed off the character, and then the movie just ends like that. Of course, it is completely destroyed and retconned in the next film, making this film seem almost pointless. But yeah, I still really like it. I also love the relationship between Laurie and her son. I think that is probably the best part of this movie for me. I think, you know, seeing how she's very overprotective of her son is great, and I love that. And I think her son is a great character. Like I said, if they had to make, you know, Resurrection, I would have liked to see him be the next target, because he's a really good character, and that would have been interesting, but nope, they just decided to do some webcam thing. So yeah, really, really like him, though. I think he's a great character, and overall, I really like this movie. I just think it's definitely aged in some aspects, and Michael is like hardly in it, but Jamie Lee Curtis is fantastic, of course. Alright, on to number 3, we have Halloween 2, which was released in 1981. So Halloween 2 is not as much of a classic as the original, but I would actually still refer to it as a classic. I think Halloween 2 is a great movie, and the fact that it has like a 31 on Rotten Tomatoes really surprises me, because I actually think this is a pretty solid sequel for the most part. Now, it does have some issues. I think Laurie is hardly in this movie, and when she is, she's not really doing much. Jamie Lee Curtis was pretty good in the original, and here her character just seems really pushed to the side, because this film is trying to keep up with the times where you had movies like Friday the 13th coming out, which were all about the kills and gore, so this movie had to kind of adapt to that by just throwing in random characters for Michael to kill off, and that's something that's definitely apparent. You know, in the long run, it doesn't bother me anymore because so many movies are like that now, but it does kind of take away from Laurie's character since she's really pushed to the side. However, Donald Pleasance. Once again, I know I've brought him up so many times, but he's great in this movie. He's absolutely fantastic. This is also the film where we find out that Michael is actually the older brother of Laurie, and that she was adopted after her parents died in a car crash, something I actually really like, because I always thought of Michael Myers as this character who was trying to kill his family. So when the new film kind of took away that idea, I had mixed feelings at first, but I don't really care that much anymore. It kind of works in the new one, actually. But yeah, I was pretty mixed on that at first, and it's something that I do like. That's one thing that's good about the Halloween series, is that you can watch kind of like any of these films and watch any timeline you want. You can kind of say, hey, I feel like watching the original timeline where you have Halloween 1 and 2, and then that ends, or you could watch, you know, blah blah blah. There's so many different like storylines and ways this whole series goes. But yeah, so I really like 2 overall. I think, you know, it was a pretty solid sequel. I love the ending when Michael, you know, is killed in this explosion. Of course, you know, there's multiple versions where he doesn't live or does live, whatever. But yeah, really good sequel overall. I just think that Laurie was hardly in it, and that is a big issue. On to number 2, we have Halloween 2018. Halloween 2018 is a fantastic sequel, and it definitely delivered on like everything I wanted to see. When I first watched it, I was actually slightly disappointed, but I gave myself some more time, and the more I thought about it, I actually liked it more. I rewatched it, and I noticed that when I rewatched it, the movie went by so fast. This movie goes by extremely fast because it's really fast-paced, which is actually the opposite of how I felt about it the first time. I thought the first 40 minutes were slow on my first viewing, but now it's like, it goes by almost way too fast. But I think this is a absolutely fantastic sequel. First of all, Michael Myers is amazing in this movie. This is definitely the best version of Michael we've seen since the original. He's so damn creepy, his mask is fantastic, his movement is so amazing. The kills in this movie are fantastic. These are the best kills in the whole series. You have the over-the-top gruesome boot kill. You have like so many fantastic moments in this movie, like the washroom scene. This film just had a lot of great moments, and I loved so much about this. But the best part is Laurie. Laurie, played by Jamie Lee Curtis in this movie, is absolutely fantastic. I loved her performance. From the trailers, we knew that she was going to be this badass Sarah Connor-like character, but what I didn't expect was an emotional level that we got from her. Her character is really, you know, depressed and has all these problems and PTSD almost from the scenario that happened with her and Michael 40 years ago. That was an aspect of her character that I was not expecting. So there were some moments that I loved. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when she's in the car and she has her gun and she's drinking, and you think she's gonna like cause the bus crash almost, but then she just stops herself from doing it. And that scene's, you know, being cut with Michael, you know, being loaded onto the prison bus, and the music that plays is amazing. The scene when Michael puts his mask on for the first time in like 40 years is epic. There's so many great moments in this movie, and I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is amazing in this movie. John Carpenter does a fantastic job. The best scene in this film for me is the scene when Michael's going around on Halloween night and he kills that old lady with the hammer, and then he kills the other lady with the butcher's knife. That was all done in one shot. It's actually 2 shots because it switches to a window view, but yeah, it was fantastic. That was such a Michael Myers scene, and I loved seeing that. I just think this movie did a fantastic job with everything. I loved it so much. I would actually say that if the original wasn't as much of a classic as it is, I would probably put this above the original. But I do have so much nostalgia for the original that it does edge over this one. But still, this film in its own merits is like amazing in my opinion, and I loved every second of it. I love the ending. The final act was fantastic with Laurie facing off against Michael. I really feared you know, for the characters. I didn't know what was going to happen. I was wondering if they're going to kill off Laurie. And I think, you know, the outcome was great, where Michael's trapped in the basement and the house is set on fire. And they'll love the way, instead of him panicking, he just stares right at them. You know, like, he doesn't even really care about the house burning. I love that so much. It feels so much like a Michael Myers thing, and that was great. Of course, they do show later on that he's not even in that room when they show the shots, so Michael probably found some way to escape. Doesn't surprise me. So there probably is going to be a sequel. I know they're talking about it anyways, and if there is one, I'm fine with that. But I kind of hope they don't just start a whole new like series. I hope they don't make like, you know, 4 more or something like that. I really just want this one and the next one, and kind of just end it there, having this trilogy that wraps everything up. But there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts on Halloween 2018. I absolutely love the movie. On to number 1, we have the original. There's no question about it. The original is a genuine classic. It is one of the best horror movies of all time, and it is definitely one of the most influential. It created and made the slasher genre into what it is today. which, you know, the genre has been dead for a few years, but I honestly think that the new Halloween can bring it back. But yeah, I just love the original. I mean, I first watched it, I think, in 2013 when I was going through like a huge horror phase, and this movie just, it's so amazing because it's such a simple story and such a simple made film. It's so effective though. I mean, just the way the camera work is with all these long first-person view shots, the really amazing soundtrack by John Carpenter, who does just a fantastic job scoring movies. The suspenseful like feel to the movie whenever Michael emerges from the shadows. This movie isn't scary. I wouldn't really call the Halloween series scary. It's just so eerie and suspenseful, and I love everything about this movie. I think this is a classic and just a really great movie all around. So there you go, guys. Those are my thoughts on the Halloween films. That is my ranking of the series. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you all next time.